Hi, everybody, and welcome to another very special episode of the Combinate podcast. I'm your host, Subhi Saadeh. I say very special this time because this is episode 150. I can't believe that it's been 150 straight weeks of posting an episode every Wednesday morning, and just very grateful that feeling the beginner's mindset for sure when it comes to this, and it feels like I just started last week. On this episode, I cannot believe it took me this long to cover this topic, to be honest, but I was graced and honored in this episode by Maysaa Attar, who is the Senior Vice President of Global R&D at Bausch Lomb, heading up the Pharma and Consumer R&D division there. Mesa has had also a distinguished career at AbbVie, Allergan, and as a professor at USC. In this episode, Mesa talks all things ophthalmic ocular combo products, a topic, like I said, that I haven't covered at all. She explains why combo products are essential for ophthalmics and talks about the intricate anatomy of the eye that makes ocular drug delivery challenging and interesting and fascinating. She explores the practical applications of combo products. She talks about things like eye drops, syringes, bio-erodible implants, and also talks about the complications, patient risks associated with things like intravitreal injection, where most people in the combination products space are used to intramuscular or IV or subcutaneous. I hadn't realized that there were so many dimensions to the eye in terms of injection, and so that was really cool to learn. She also talks about future advancements in treating conditions like glaucoma and wet AMD, and just all through weaves in just how important the vision and the eye is to our daily lives. Again, huge thank you and shout out to those of you who listen to the show. I really appreciate it. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And without further ado, here is Mesa. Hello, Combi Nation. My name is Subhi Saadeh. I've spent over a decade in medical device, pharma, and combination product development. Our industry feels complicated sometimes. Drugs, devices, clinical trials, submissions, sterilization, validation, design control, risk management, market access, reimbursement. The list goes on. My goal is mastery, so this podcast is to ask questions I have to people who may have the answers. Each week on the Combinate podcast, I talk to someone about their area to further understand and simplify. Whether you're a pharma person trying to understand the next wave of products, or a device person trying to navigate a pharma system you're unfamiliar with, or a newbie in both areas, I invite you to listen, and together we can simplify by combinating.
Okay, so let's talk about why you need combination products in ophthalmics. It starts off with the eye itself, right? If you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, vision is critically important to the survival of any living thing. And I don't know that there is another organ that is more well designed to prevent exogenous materials and things from the outside finding a way of coming to the inside. And probably one of the best examples of that is your retina, right? That's the money part. It's the part of your brain to be able to see. And if you think about the way the eye is designed, right? We first have our eyelids that are blinking and literally saying if something on the outside touches the eye, get out, get out. We also have tear flow where you actually start like gushing liquid to say, get out, get out. If somehow something finds a way to penetrate those ocular surface tissues and enter the globe, you then have this gushing river called the aqueous humor that's turning over and saying, get out, get out. If you find a way to get past that, then you have the vitreous, this thick, gelatinous, let's say, moat that you have to then find your way to the back to finally get to see the retina. And so, with that being the case, and this is just simply from like ocular delivery, if you think about it that way, and there's a lot more tissue and fluid dynamic barrier. The way you deliver a drug. So it's not enough to have the molecule and the pharmacological target. It's also how you deliver to be able to achieve efficacious concentrations, to engage that pharmacological target to get the patient outcome. So you need to be innovating not only molecules and understanding disease, the formulation, as well as the device that's going to help you take that drug to where it needs to go.
So just given the fact that, say, most parenterals go either infusion or intramuscular or whatever,
Yeah.
the intra target sounds like it has a lot more hoops to jump through than vein,
Yes.
muscle, sub-Q.
Yes. So let's
So what
talk.
is what does that mean practically?
Yeah. Okay. So practically, so there was a product that I was involved in the development. It's called Ozurdex, right? And what it is a bio-erodible implant of dexamethasone. And to deliver it, it treats back of the eye conditions, right? To deliver it to the eye, you actually have to load that pellet into an injector that, obvious, and you inject right into the vitreous to be able to drop that pellet that then, if you're making an injection into the eye, nobody wants to come often, right? You remember when I was a kid, we used to say, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. Right now, to treat
Mhm.
retinal diseases, we stick a needle in patients' eyes. Nobody wants that. So
I've never worked in the ocular space. Is it painful?
it's a good question. Obviously, it depends on the procedure, the size of the needle, and also, again, the skill probably of the person doing it. But I have heard some people do complain of eye pain, yes.
But is it like,
But I think the psychological pain of it is worse.
yeah, so
Knowing
that's what I was
that
going to
someone's
ask is
coming, yes,
in terms of patient risk,
yes.
blindness, like what are the common risks associated with injections into the eye?
If you look at the prescribing information for any injection, and it could be things that are bio-erodible implants, or what's the most common injection are biologics, biologic drugs to treat wet AMD, right? Severe intraocular inflammation or infection, right? That could then result in severe intraocular inflammations, things like endophthalmitis. That is the worst type of side effect one could see and could certainly result in vision loss. And so that's something that is considered very carefully during the development of a product and during the development of the procedure, and obviously thinking about the device and make the whole aspect of it is thought through, and then the regulators care about it. Now, interestingly, that you bring this up, this is something that's evolved more recently. Is there were a few drugs that were being developed to treat wet AMD, which is age-related macular degeneration. And there were events of severe intraocular inflammation that could result in blindness, right? And there were even certain drugs. There was a very famous drug, I think this is around the 2017 timeframe, where it's obviously a safe, great drug, but there were these incidents and clusters of severe intraocular inflammation. And when they started to look at what might be causing it, they identified that it could have something to do with the syringe, with the needle, and certain lots of material. Then there was a lot of research done because other drugs started to experience the same thing. And the few learnings that came out of it, people were using syringes that weren't designed specifically for intravitreal injection, right? And that became a thing as there
Sorry,
was
because again, I'm a newbie green in this space.
yeah,
Intravitreal
vitriol.
intravitreal is a subset of intraocular, or is another
Exactly,
thing?
exactly.
Okay.
It's that
It
space in the back of the eye that is a gelatinous kind of material that you can, it is the most common, and retina physicians are very skillful at injecting into that space. And then the retina, that's the best way to gain access to deliver drug to the retina.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And go ahead.
I was going to say, it was only in the 2020s, I think, we started to see a lot more reports about, hey, you need to be thinking about these syringes. You need to be thinking about the silicone oil in these syringes, and you need to think about how it interacts with the biologic drug, which could then set off an immune response. And now we have syringes that are being developed that are specific for intravitreal delivery. And as things evolve, the importance of that product presentation and what you're using to inject the drug has become a lot more important because of that experience.
But so what features, what is it, like needle gauge? Is it related to
The
the
pressure
handling of the
applied.
syringe? Yeah, what are we talking here? What
So,
factors?
so it's probably multifactorial, but so it starts off, let's say, with the actual biologic drug and the impurities that you have in that drug. So biologics are produced in living cells, right? And so some of those impurities that come along could be problematic, right? So it first starts off with your drug substance and getting a good process with ultra low levels of impurities. Because when you inject into a muscle or you do an IV injection, the volume that you have in which those impurities are going to distribute, so the overall concentration is going to be much lower than if you inject into the vitreous, which is only 4 ml, and you're designing things so that the drug will last for weeks and months. So you have, in a small enclosed environment, an impurity that is being presented to a ultra sensitive tissue that is guarded from any kind of.
Immune response.
Exactly.
And so it's just marinating.
Exactly. So that's one thing. But what has become there's been excellent work. There's a physician called Gustavo Milo who's done really fantastic work to understand how you select a syringe. And it could be it's really the silicone oil that sits in the syringe to help when you press it for it to go down, the silicone oil that's on the actual needle itself. So as it enters, all of that could be problematic. And yes, there's a lot of thought about what it could be, but probably it's a combination of things and how they interact with your drug.
Now, what about the kind of regulatory landscape for these kinds of products? Are they any different in terms of a regular NDA or a regular BLA?
Because it's a drug device combo, the way it gets treated, right? More recently in ophthalmology, even putting into an eyedropper, that's considered a device. And so you
Yeah.
have to think about the regular NDA if it's a small molecule, BLA if it's a large molecule, those components. But then there's other things, a human factor study and things like that, to talk through exactly what you were saying, how the actual procedure happens, that you have to think through, and other design control things that are related to the device part of the innovation. So you have both.
Yeah, I think my listenership is very familiar with the
Yes.
elements that you just talked about. But in terms of the just double clicking on HF, I'm wondering, is there any specific I don't know why, but whenever I think ocular products, I can't even imagine getting something injected into my eye. So what have you seen in HF studies that might be unique?
So in terms of how unique they are, I don't know that they're necessarily unique, but it's the same types of considerations. Other than you have to think about maybe some of the equipment that the physician might have as they're making those injections, and how easy it is to hold the injector, about the pressure, those, I think it's the typical human factor stuff, but just what's unique is you could be injecting it into the vitreous, you could be injecting it into the intracameral space, so that's the front of the eye. You could be injecting, well, so that's probably what's unique here, right? The eye in itself, if I were to start counting all the different places people are injecting things, it's there's the subretinal space, there's the suprachoroidal space, there's the episcleral, there's so many different angles and areas that you could inject, and how the form factor probably, and how easy that is for the physician, is going to depend on where you are injecting.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked that question is I've been a lot of HF studies, and but I've also only worked in sub-Q intramuscular IV, and so those are typically done in a sort of an injection pad that's
Yes.
supposed to mimic. They're typically not done in human, and I'm wondering, how do you make sure that, just given all the different permutations that you just mentioned, how do you confirm that the HCP can actually, that they know that, how, because it all goes to validating your user related risk
Yes.
controls and your user needs and stuff.
Yeah.
And so how do you know that the physician actually did it appropriately?
So, one, in the human factor study, or just in general?
I guess broadly, but I'm talking about
Broadly.
human
So
factors.
so here's the thing. It depends on where you're injecting. So that's, so something, and that's actually a really important point that you're bringing up. So when it first started, people felt a little, oh, intravitreal injections. That was like, what, certainly more than a decade ago, if not 2 decades ago. Now
They felt that way because it was so difficult, and this
it's new, it's not as
it's
common. But now you ask, probably, I think, for example, in the United States, what I've heard is we have about 3,000 retina surgeons that do these injections in the country. They're
is it
trained,
considered a surgery to do that injection?
not intravitreal injection, but say it's subretinal. Yes, you have to go into the OR.
Wow. And the only thing
A
that's happening is the
subretinal.
injection,
Yeah. Yes.
and you're under general anesthesia.
I'm not a physician, but they go into
Yeah.
the OR, so
So
it's a
they're
big
under some sort
process.
of,
Yes, yes.
yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, on you go.
Versus
Sorry.
intravitreal is an in-office procedure, not a surgery. And so that's preferred. But there may be tissue barriers, there may be other. So for example, let's go back to wet AMD. Age-related macular degeneration is in wet and dry. In the Western world, is the leading cause of blindness. The way you treat it is through injections in the eye. Intravitreal is the preferred route because that's the way the first set of drugs for wet AMD were all delivered. Having said that, what's to address the fact that people don't want to be injected every month or every 2 months or every 3 months or every 4 months, people are exploring gene therapy. And the way they are gene therapy, one of the ways they deliver it is by a subretinal injection, right? They're exploring other ways because, again, and that the subretinal injection, part of the value of the subretinal, I think, is when you look at intravitreal injection, it actually is one of the most immunogenic ways to deliver a biologic into the eye. And again, if you remember, you don't want that immune response because that's what can cause that severe intraocular inflammation that can then cause blindness in itself.
And so
Versus,
are you saying that it may be a space where the treatment isn't necessarily for the eye, but because it won't give you that response, it may be used for non-eye related things?
no, what I'm saying is intravitreal is preferred, but it has the downside of, one, it might be more likely to elicit an immune response that could have then
Mhm.
more side effects or less efficacy versus a subretinal. It's less immunogenic, plus maybe where you need to deliver the transgene and get transduction, it becomes easier. People need to think about those things as they pick the different routes of administration. But I think if you were to ask most retina physicians, the preferred route and what they're used to doing right now is an intravitreal injection, which is an in-office procedure.
Oh. And so that goes to your point of change is hard till it's not. And at one point, the intravitreal was something that was uncommon. Now it's more common than what was common back then.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And so, from a drug development perspective, as you think about new routes of administration, you also sit there and go, okay, so for example, right now, glaucoma, it's the silent thief of vision. The people lose vision and lose eyesight every year, including in this country, because of glaucoma. Even though generic IOP, intraocular pressure lowering medications, are widely available. But people think glaucoma is a high pressure disease. It's not. That is a risk factor for glaucoma. What glaucoma actually is a neurodegenerative disease or diseases. And these specific cells called retinal ganglion cells start to die. And when they die, you lose vision, and they're happening in the back of the eye. So as we start to think about treating and neuroprotective therapies, eye drops aren't going to get to where it needs to go. But then if you're going to a glaucoma specialist, they're used to treating with an eye drop, IOP lowering. And then to start thinking, okay, they're going to have to be doing injections now. How do we approach that? Because everything's so specialized. There's a glaucoma physician specialist versus a retina specialist. And the person who has glaucoma is going to be seeing a glaucoma physician who's not used to doing intravitreal injections. So it's that kind of consideration.
So good. I have like as close. Anyways, I won't get into that. But one project that I worked on back in college was on glaucoma, and it's taking me back now. One of the treatments is stents, right? Drug-coated
Yes,
stents.
yes, yes.
And so have you worked on those kinds of products before?
So I have not worked on those products. I'm aware of them, but no, I haven't worked on
Okay, because that's always you. It's very hard to find folks who have worked on drug-led combination products, or excuse me, device-led combination products, where the primary function of a stent is largely mechanical, and the heparin or whatever it's coated with is helping, but it's not that what's keeping the
it.
pressure flowing is just the mechanical a kind of expansion of the area. So
It's interesting you bring this up because this is a real area in ophthalmology that's growing right now. And there's a lot of companies exploring things like, what you're talking, drug eluting stents. So that's one thing. And along those lines, there is a company that was a real leader in something called MIGS. So minimally invasive. Gosh, I know I can't remember what the GS, but it's to treat, it was a surgical device to treat glaucoma. But they actually came out recently with something called the iDose, it's Glaukos, it started off as a device company that's now going into pharma. There's also
minimally invasive glaucoma surgery.
there you go. Minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. There you go. And so in that, I think they essentially put a stent. That's what I understand it to be. But now they're doing that with a drug-eluting device. There's also another company that is exploring the use of, the most common surgery in the United States, I believe, is cataract surgery,
Is
right?
that right?
I believe so. And what they
Oh,
put in is you put in an intraocular lens. And so the idea would be when you put in those lenses, you also have them start eluting drug. So to treat glaucoma, because again, let's think about from a human factors thing, right? You take an eye drop.
you're putting
Have
them
you,
in anyways.
and how hard is it to put an eye drop in, right? But then you think about the 80-year-old who, and the way glaucoma is typically treated, right? It's not enough to have one MOA. They're doing multiple eye drops and
What's MOA?
mechanism of action.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. So pharmacologically, you come at it from different ways. And
Oh, is that right? It's so you're saying it's typically not like we're gonna do this one thing. It's typically like we're gonna throw the kitchen sink at it, more or
it's not the
less.
kitchen sink. It's okay. You might have a prostamide. You also might have an alpha adrenergic. You might
More than one
have
thing.
more than one thing. Okay. Because essentially you have a buildup of pressure. So there's different ways. The fluid dynamics of the eye are really important. So there's different. So what you were talking about, the stent is the trabecular meshwork and all that. So you can manage the outflow, you can manage the inflow. There's different ways to go about it. So this 80-year-old, right? My dad has glaucoma and he's 80 years old. He's got to put multiple drugs in his eye. Actually going back and getting a drop in your eye is really hard. So the older you get, right, maybe the way you hold things and that fine motor skills becomes more difficult, right? And so that's a problem. So then you could get underdosing. And then if you have underdosing and you have the pressure not being managed properly in the eye, it starts pressing back on the back of the eye where your retinal ganglion cells are, and you start to lose vision because that mechanical pressure could be a problem. So a real innovation is, okay, are there like these minimally invasive glaucoma surgery or maybe with intraocular lenses that are drug eluting so that we don't rely on patients to be dosing in a very imprecise way to manage a disease that could lead you to blindness.
So this is where I think just challenging perceptions is really important. I find it almost funny that after 140 some odd, 100, almost 150 episodes is the first time we've talked about this. But just given the way that I've seen some of the guidance documents come up, I thought that ocular was this very mature area, and it doesn't seem like it is. It seems like there's still a lot to go.
For sure. What's mature and ocular, there's certain aspects that are mature. I would say certainly eye drops are pretty mature. Although recently, like I said, there was this innovation where the actual dropper device is a device now. Before we used to treat it as
Right.
purely, so that, and there's probably a good regulatory story why that happened, but that happened. That's very, what's the word? Mature. That's right.
It's an interesting development. Yeah.
But here's the reality, okay? Right now, people are getting older and we're becoming really good at, there's all this longevity and aging and stuff like that. What that means is people need their eyesight for longer and really going after these, because if you look at any survey, if after a disease that takes away your life, a diagnosis that takes away your life, people fear most losing vision. And combine that with the fact that if you have small kids, how soon are they behind a screen? We have 1-year-olds looking at iPads, and then the rest of us spend the rest of our life either in front of a monitor or in front of a phone. What's that
Cooking
doing
our
to your
eyes.
eye? What's that doing to your eye as you age? So,
Mm.
as we have to treat these things and treat inside the eye, to your point, there's a lot of room for innovation.
Yeah, I think just the part about I'm sure it's like as far as the five senses go, on average, people, I personally am a hearing guy, but I'd say by and large, at least my guesstimate is like half of people would say vision first is the most important sense. And where you started the episode with the eye is the one thing that is just don't let anything get in here.
Yes.
I never
Yes.
thought of that. What you've spent your whole career working in this space,
Yeah.
right? Was it just serendipitous? You landed in it and you liked it and you stayed, or you like, how did you stick with eye?
So it's a good question. Uh, to begin with, it was so it's funny. My first job at Allergan had nothing to do with the eye. That's where I started my career. It actually had to do with skincare and psoriasis. That's what I was brought in to do. But Allergan had a long history in ocular innovation. And so from that, I became exposed to it. Growing up, I would always hear stories about my mother's grandmother and how, because of diabetes, she lost her eyesight and how much that impacted her. And then I had relatives. I still remember there was a relative of mine when early starting my career who was diagnosed with wet AMD that we've talked about before, and he was losing his eyesight and he was desperate. And it really stuck with me that, there's things that are difficult to deal with as you get older, but losing vision is really horrible. And this is what I tell people. Have you ever experienced when a baby really small smiles at you, right? It's a very special feeling. If you start to break that down, it's actually a really remarkable event because it's the first way a human communicates, and they can be really small, but they see something that they either recognize or they somehow know is a good thing, and then they smile. That vision is such an important tool, and it's inherent to how we communicate with the world from such a young, like from the beginning of our life. To have that taken away is terrible. And so when I moved into ocular projects, I knew every single day I went to work, what I did matter.
It was
It
important.
really mattered to somebody. And in my job today at Bausch Lomb, where we're focused on the eye, we have a new CEO who is committed to innovation and committed to provide, enabling his organization to provide those solutions for patients. It doesn't require you're living your best life where you do have a job, but you're actually doing something really fantastic every day and you feel good about it.
Yeah. The wet AMD progression, how long does it take?
Yeah, it's this good question. So I think this is the way I understand it. When it gets to a point, so I think the rate of
Because from
progression,
the way that you described it sounds like cataracts where it takes time.
I think, okay, so let's talk about age-related macular degeneration, right? So age, so that's the number one risk factor is getting older. Macular means the macula, which is the middle of your retina, and it's the part that's responsible for fine vision, uh, age-related macular degeneration. So something is dying. And what's dying is rods and cones. Those are specific neurons that are responsible for vision. Okay. That there's lots of there, and then in the disease journey, the patient journey, once those cells start to get exposed, you can take things like vitamins, the AREDS vitamins that you see at Costco. The National Eye Institute has done a lot of studies to show that those are really important at protecting the eye. Okay, you can
What are
take
they
that.
called?
AREDS. Bausch Lomb has the proven formula, which is Preservision, and it's sold at Costco. So I did not take Preservision before I worked at Bausch Lomb, but then after I came here, I looked at the data generated by the National Eye Institute. I'm like, oh my God, everybody needs to be taking this. So I'm taking them now. But okay, so it starts off with that. And what I want to say to you is what will bring where people will start with the rate of progression. It could progress into something called dry AMD, which goes geographic atrophy, or wet AMD, which is what you asked about. The rate of progression varies, but let's say a person who gets wet AMD, what that is the blood vessels around your eye are leaking, right? And then that causes a host of problems that affect vision. And what's really fascinating is the way it's treated. Okay, where is the other place where you get blood vessels growing that are pathological and shouldn't be growing and that we want to stop from growing? Tumors, right? So somebody really smart years ago realized these vascular endothelial growth factor anti-VEGF drugs. Hey, let's inject them into the eye and see what happens. And it was remarkable. You give them that anti-VEGF injection, and immediately they're immediate. The edema, the swelling, the vessels regress, and they can see again. So that's great. Now, AMD, the dry kind, that I think they say it's anywhere from 5 to 7 years from first diagnosis that it progresses. But the problem with that one is once your neurons die, they're dead, right? There is no regenerative therapy. So you're losing vision. So that's one's a little different. Yeah.
Oh, as we move to close,
Yeah.
what's a book that changed your life?
A book that changed my life. I'll say a
Take your
book.
time, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about many books. Changing your life is a big deal.
I see. I guess, I suppose there's in the quality space, there's a critical, major, minor, right?
I'll
Change
tell
can
you
be
one that,
small.
hey, I'm gonna tell you one that impacted me recently. Okay. And it's a book, I believe it's called Range. Okay. And it speaks to in the world, and I think it was written by a neuroscientist. And it speaks to the fact that right now you have all these people with deep expertise. And we need that. But really, at this point, to solve the big problems, it's probably the intersection of multiple expertise that is going to be where real magic happens. And it speaks to those individuals that are able to work across a wide range of disciplines. And in my mind, it was something intuitive that I know, right? Anytime at work or anything in life where you've actually worked with a team of people that come at it in different ways, but don't hate each other and actually enjoy working together, do amazing things. And so that book was, I think, the best articulation of why we need that and what you can achieve with it. And so, yeah, that's a book I would recommend, definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it. And yeah, I think this is something I need to read, just given
Yeah, but as I thought a little more, I'm going to give you another book. So,
ooh,
something that was always hard for me is I would sometimes get really nervous before I spoke. And there's that, I think it's like one of the top Amy Cuddy TED Talks. And what was it called? But she had this fantastic book about bringing your big, bold self. And again, it was talking about how you can use your physiology to make yourself more confident before you speak. I think just that book also really learning how to, because I think, be it range,
presence.
presence, that's it. Range or presence. It comes back to communication. And how we communicate with the world is it changes everything. You know what they say, smile and the world smiles with you. That's something I've learned in life. You can almost say anything to anybody as long as you say it with a smile.
That's right. Where can people find you, Mesa?
Where can people find me? In Irvine, California. Orange
On
County, the best
LinkedIn,
place in the world.
Twitter,
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's fantastic.
Yeah, same. Thanks for coming on. This was awesome. I'm glad
Okay.
glad I had you on and finally discuss this topic.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me. It's fantastic.